Hey guys, it's Kris Jones for episode 41 of Ask Me Anything. So, in the last week, I have been asked the same question, and it is a question that I get all of the time. And for those of you that have watched the previous 40 videos or so, you could probably guess what the question is. And you could probably also guess that I'm going to answer it technically, because I actually believe that business success is a science. I believe it's a technical science. Too often people get so wrapped up in their idea or the complexities around business success such that they discourage themselves from taking that first step. But anyway, the question that I have been asked is, it always starts this way. It's like, Kris, I have a great idea. How do I get started? And honestly, if you don't believe me that business success is a science, that there have been many people before us that have built successful businesses, and they have, basically left behind a blueprint, then you'll be overwhelmed and you won't know where to start. But I thought, I would actually provide a practical place to start in response to that question of, got an idea, how do I get started? So, for me, that question is best answered through probably one of the most recommended books that I've ever made. There's a lot of books that I mentioned, from, How to Think Big to Awaken the Giant Within, to a whole number of others. But Eric Ries wrote this book called The Lean Startup. This is not a book review, but I did want to just show you guys this book and mention that the answer to the question is within these, let's see here, 320 pages. But so here's the thing. So the first step is really to test whether or not people want what you think they want, whether or not your product meets the expectations or the excitement or the interest of the potential consumer. And here's the thing, and this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to dedicate a whole episode to this question, is that testing your idea need not be super expensive. It need not be overwhelming. The key to the lean startup and the concept of lean manufacturing and lean analytics is boiling things down, boiling your idea down to the most basic test. According to Eric and a number of others who've written on this topic, that basic test is what's called a minimally viable product, or an MVP. Here's why you should be excited about this concept, is because the intent is to take your big complex idea that has all of these extraordinary features that you, by the way, are guessing that they're going to meet product market fit, that they're going to meet the expectations of your prospective consumer base. And the idea is to strip away the ones that aren't needed to test the basic premise of your idea. The minimally viable product is taking your idea and boiling it down to its essence so that you could actually get it in front of a consumer and see how they respond to it. Once you do that, you need to measure whether or not you're getting the response that you want. I mean, if you sell a product or a widget, buying the product, maybe buying it a second time, sharing it and getting someone else to buy it. If it's an app, someone downloads your app, they come back into the app, and there's a number of things in terms of analytics that you use during the measurement process to learn. So the 3 steps that Eric actually lays out are these idea of build, measure, learn. Build the MVP, measure it, and depending again on what your product or service is, if it's an app, you could measure things like daily active use, weekly active use, You could install some analytics into the app to see how much time they're spending in the app, maybe where they dropped off. But then that third part is learn. So one thing I did want to point out about the build side of it is that often people don't take that first step because they just think it's way too expensive to test whether or not their idea is good in the first place. And I'm here to tell you that it's not. And in fact, being someone who founded a mobile app development company, I think it was 5 years ago, what I learned is actually how to get people to understand the idea of an MVP and how to actually take a proposal that may have been $50,000 or $100,000 to develop their initial idea and say, wait. We could build that for you, but it's going to be very difficult to know if all of these features that you actually want in the app are in demand or of interest to the consumer base. So let's whittle it down, if you will. Let's strategically let's boil your idea down to its essence. Put it in front of the customer or in front of the user and get feedback from them. And there's another concept in this whole lean sort of genre called continuous learning or continuous innovation. What do you think would be a better idea? Building a product or a service based on the feedback from customer demand, what the customer actually wants, what they need, or based on whatever you have in your head or whatever you've been dreaming about them needing. The reality is that the more effective and the more cost-effective and the more strategic way to build products and services and companies is through that continuous learning and innovation process driven by the actual customer itself. So there you go. So where you start is with a minimally viable product. So if you have an app idea, because that's one of the things I get approached about the most, what I'd encourage you to do is to take out literally a notepad or several pieces of paper. Start with, what problem are you solving, right? Or why, basically, why are you building the app? What are you going to do? Are you going to entertain? Are you going to facilitate something? But get down the idea and make sure you massage it so that it's something that ultimately you could test, right? Then I'm okay with you at the next step writing down all of the things you think, all of the features that you believe the app needs, right? In order to make your customers really, really happy. It's okay. And I'm okay with it being a long list. But the next step would be to actually look hard at all of the features and say, if I just want to test whether or not the customer, the user, wants my basic idea, the problem that I'm solving, what features are needed? And the idea is to get down to as few features as possible to test that premise, to test that idea. And then once you do that, if you validated the test, that's great. Then you could get feedback from the user and continue down the same path that you started with. Maybe add an additional feature to enhance the experience. Maybe you'll learn something through that initial test that wasn't even on your original long list of features, but now you have it. So now you're going from something you didn't even have to one of the next steps, something that you already know is in demand. And so you keep going through that process. You may also find that initial test comes back negative, meaning that people just don't want the product, or people don't want the product the way that you positioned it or shared it with them. So you have a couple of choices at that point. One is to go back to the starting line and say, did I set that first test up incorrectly? Is there still reason to believe that my original idea is potentially valid, even though it was invalidated based on the one test you set up? If you decide there's enough there to retest, maybe change something around, maybe you put it in front of the wrong user, whatever, continue. And just, tweak it enough so that you could get a valid test. But if you learn that through trial and error, through experimentation, that the demand isn't there, then you execute something called a pivot. And a pivot, P-I-V-O-T, is something that gets thrown around a lot in the tech space. Ultimately, all it means is that you started your business, you started that first experiment with one idea, and you realized you were unable to validate it, but something else, you gained some insight, you gained something from that process where a light bulb went off and said, oh wow, I want to test something different. And that something different would be a pivot. There are success stories. I think Pinterest, for instance, which is $1 billion+ startup, originally started as something completely different. I do know that those guys had a heck of a time raising investment capital early on in their business because they just couldn't articulate what problem they were solving. I think the same is true with Twitter, microblogging service. They were originally called something completely different, and then they realized that 140 characters at that time and constricting it actually did enable people to communicate in a new way that wasn't being done on Facebook at the time, among others. So both Twitter and Pinterest both pulled off a couple of pivots before they actually found product market fit. Now, once you find product market fit, which I kind of was reflecting on, it's where there is some validation. It's like, okay, you're getting a positive response based on the test that you set up. So therefore you start adding on additional layers based on customer feedback to build like the ultimate killer product. That is the cycle that you want to put your business through. You need not spend a gazillion dollars trying to predict what your prospective customer base wants. Why not just build something, put it in front of them, and ask them if they like it? Not quite that simple, but why not setting it up that way where you don't have to put out a ton of coin and you're able to quickly evaluate whether or not your idea has something that you should put lighter fluid on, or whether or not it's something you need to pull back and think through. So check out the Lean Startup. This is a book that I've read several times. I'm actually reading another, it's not by Eric, it's by two other authors, called Lean Analytics. It's all based on this idea of lean manufacturing and minimally viable product. But anyway, I've recommended this book a ton of times. I've read it several times myself. And think about it. If you've been struggling to take that first step in business, it's probably because you don't know where to start. And this book helps you get through that. And some of the concepts I shared with you guys today should be helpful. For those of you that have been watching, many of you have either pulled me aside or reached out and said, thank you, I've watched all of the videos, or that you've benefited from it. So that is awesome, but I also want you guys to participate. I want this process to be active, so ask questions. Feel free to ask me them privately. Feel free to post them below. One of the things that I'd really like to increase, if at all possible, is engagement. I've said to you guys many times that learning is not a passive process, it's an active process. In order to do that, I need to hear how you guys are doing. Were there any videos that I've shot up to this point that particularly hit you in a way, in a positive or negative way, but I'm hoping to hear some stories. You need not share them, like I said, in the comments. You could reach out privately. But has any of the content that I've shared up to this point been valuable? Do you have follow-up questions on any of it? One of the things I do want to come back to is back in February, I did a video on goal setting. And guess who set some goals on that video? I did. And I weighed myself this morning, and I think I need to turn things into high gear in order to stay true to my weight goal, 180 pounds on average monthly through December of this year. But anyway, I'm going to come back and revisit that. But I guess what I'm asking you guys is to start getting active here. I need you guys to share with me what you've liked, what you didn't like, what's hit you, and how I could even go deeper on some of these topics. With that said, I hope today's discussion on lean startup and minimally viable product was helpful. For the 3 people, including you, Dave Knockley, that asked me this question, take the first step, man, buy the book, and then put together a test to see if the idea you have is worth investing a ton of coin in. But don't do it until you do that. Thanks a lot, and I will see you guys for episode 42. Peace.